Hey, good morning, everyone. I use that term everyone quite intentionally as I really have no idea who might be watching this video. Family, friends, people from church, fellow Americans, or even just fellow humans. I haven't done a video in quite some time. I've had other priorities, frankly, but today is a day, and this week has been a week that has kind of shaken us to our core. And it requires a certain amount of introspection and honestly demands some sort of response from thoughtful, God fearing people. Today, as you know, is September 11th, and that's a date that I will never forget. 24 years ago, I was serving at my first church in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. We were all packed up and ready to leave for a staff retreat that morning, and then word began to spread around the church that the retreat was canceled and we should all turn on the television as soon as possible. And what I saw that day is the same thing that many of you saw. And if you're listening today and you're under the age of 30 or so, let me tell you what we all saw. We saw senseless hatred. We saw terrorists giving their own lives simply for the purpose of bringing death and destruction to others. 3,000 people died in the Twin Towers alone. Now, I grew up in northern New Jersey, which means that, like most people from that area, I knew somebody who lost their life in the towers. And the question that I've been asking ever since is why? Well, fast forward 24 years to today, a day where just about everybody is asking that same question: why? Yesterday, our nation was shocked and outraged by the news of Charlie Kirk's assassination. And I've got to tell you, I'm feeling it this morning. First thing I did when I arrived at work this morning was to lower our flag to half-mast for 9/11 and for Charlie. And by the way, let's not forget that there was another school shooting yesterday in Colorado, and there was one not long before that in Minnesota. It seems to be a never-ending kind of thing. Let's not forget that there are violent conflicts happening in Gaza, Ukraine, Myanmar, Sudan, Ethiopia, and many other places. We have good reason to grieve this morning. We have good reason to be praying for Charlie's wife and children and the many other families and nations that are suffering this morning. And we have good reason to wonder, why is all of this happening? Why is our country and our world so divided? And I guess in one sense, we'll never really know the reasons why. We'll never fully comprehend what the terrorists were thinking as they hijacked 3 airplanes and flew them into the Twin Towers and the Pentagon and a field in western Pennsylvania, which was not the target. We'll never be able to understand what that shooter was thinking yesterday as he took aim at a peaceful 31-year-old husband and father of 2 children. We'll never be able to fathom what kind of pain or hurt could cause somebody to bring a loaded gun into a school. Why? I have no idea. None at all. However, in another sense, we know exactly why these things are happening because the Bible tells us exactly how we have gotten to this point. In Romans chapter 1, the Apostle Paul explains that the truth about God can be plainly seen simply by looking at his creation. Whether you're peering into the mysteries of the cosmos, looking at billions and billions of stars through a telescope, or whether you're contemplating the immense complexity of a single strand of DNA through a microscope, it is so clear that it was God who created all of this. No way did this happen by random chance. But Paul continues, saying that much of the world has rejected this clear truth about God. They did not thank him, nor did they give him the glory that he deserves. And as a result, Paul says their thinking became futile and their hearts were darkened. And because of this, people became filled with every kind of wickedness, evil, greed, and depravity. So why would somebody fly an airplane into a building, or shoot Charlie Kirk, or take aim at school children? According to Romans, it's because they've rejected the truth about God, which affects the heart and the mind to such an extent that they can only be said to be living in darkness. Friends, these are dark days. I'm feeling that on a personal level today, and I suspect you are too. But let me tell you why I feel compelled to make a video this morning. It was not just to ask the why question. It was actually to ask the how should we respond question. Now, as Americans, I agree with much of what's being said on social media this morning. Violence is never the solution. Regardless of whether you agree with the ideas of another human being, we should be able to discuss those things peacefully, and we should never resort to violence. No matter which side of the political aisle you happen to stand on, we should be able to agree about that much. But if you're a Christian, as I am, I think there's even more that the Bible demands of us as we respond to these horrific tragedies. See, I've been observing the responses of various churches and various individuals over the past day or so, and I've looked at way more social media than I normally care to do, certainly way more than I plan to look at today. But I'm seeing two distinct ways that Christians are responding. The first way is to respond out of fear and anger. And look, I can certainly understand the feelings of rage over what is happening out there. I can certainly understand parents feeling a certain amount of fear, right? I mean, if Charlie can be shot for peacefully just talking about the truth as he sees it, is it safe for my kids in this world anymore? And if we're being honest, I think the answer is no. It's not safe, not for them and not for us. But here's the thing, it has never been safe. Every single one of Jesus' disciples, with the exception of John, was murdered for speaking truth. And even John was permanently exiled to an island where he couldn't cause much trouble. So no, it's not safe in this world for us or our kids. And maybe that causes you to be angry and fearful this morning. But I'm hearing some churches and some Christians responding in anger. This is why we hate the left. We're not going to rest until we take them down. But let me remind you of something. Think about January 6th, 2021. Now, there are many arguments about what really happened on that day, and I'm not here to dispute that. But the fact is, 5 people lost their lives that day as violence broke out at the U.S. Capitol. And many Democrats looked at it and said, see, this is what all Republicans are like. And that wasn't fair, was it? Most Republicans that I know were sitting in their homes, watching this play out and shaking their heads saying, this is not the way. And I have to believe this morning that the vast majority of Democrats have been listening to the news over the last 24 hours, and they're shaking their heads saying, this is not the way, right? If we could just do the very thing that Charlie Kirk spent his life doing, talking openly, honestly, and peacefully about our ideas, and actually listening and hearing what the other side is saying, maybe we could find a better path forward. See, here's the real danger to responding in anger and fear. It causes us to pull away from the world, causes us to pull away from dialogue with others. We surround ourselves only with people who agree with us. Let's bunker down in the church or in our political ideology and only talk to people that agree. Let's pull our kids out of school and sports and activities because it's not safe. Right now, I know and I recognize that there are many reasons people homeschool their kids that don't have anything to do with fear. I also know that many homeschooling families find other ways like sports or theater or different things to get their kids involved in the community. I'm not saying homeschooling's bad, but here's what can happen when we respond in anger and fear. We drive away anyone who thinks differently from us. And I'm seeing this happen in churches where the leadership reacts in anger and says, see, this is why we don't like the left. And if you don't vote red, you're not welcome here. But what happens next? All of a sudden, there are no dissenting voices. There is no dialogue. There's no healthy conversation of the sort that Charlie Kirk actually lived for. And do you know what happens when everyone thinks the same and there are no voices of dissent? History has proven this, by the way. This is not my opinion here. They radicalize. And I have to tell you, I think it's a really bad idea for the church to radicalize around a political ideology. The only thing that we want to be radical about is Jesus, yes? So I think fear and anger are the wrong responses for the church right now. But I'm also seeing another common response, and I think this one is spot on. What is this alternative response that the church and Christians can promote? Not fear and anger, but love and light. I said earlier that the why question is answered in Romans chapter 1. When people reject God, their hearts and minds are darkened. So what is the solution to that? Light. Jesus says in Matthew 5:16, let your light shine before others that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. And this is what I'm seeing. While some churches and Christians are retreating and hiding from the world, isolating with other like-minded people so that they can be angry together, I'm also seeing many churches and leaders and Christians calling for a better response. Now is not a time to hide. It's a time to invest ourselves in the world around us. Let our light shine so that they see Christ in us. And this was Charlie's mission, wasn't it? This guy didn't hide from anything. He was out there speaking truth boldly yet lovingly. And he was willing to listen and engage people in conversation, even people who disagreed with him. In fact, maybe even especially people who disagreed with him. And even as he engaged in political conversations, Charlie found a way to point people to Jesus. Not only love, but also light. Now, I never met Charlie. Honestly, I've learned more about him in the last 24 hours than I ever knew before, but I'm impressed by what I've learned, and I'm pretty convinced that I will meet him someday in heaven, and I'm really looking forward to that. But look, I need to wrap this up, so let me just say this. There are two ways that we can respond to these recent tragedies. We can get mad and fearful and choose to retreat, or we can move forward and engage the world in a loving way that shines the light of Jesus to them. Which seems better to you? Well, I can tell you which seemed better to Jesus. As he gave the disciples their mission, he told them that the world would hate them just as it hated Jesus. But he didn't tell them to go hide somewhere and live to a ripe old age. It seems personal safety isn't actually Jesus' highest priority. Instead, he tells them to go and make disciples. Build my church, right? Go on the offensive. The gates of hell will not withstand you. And how are they supposed to do this? Jesus says, let your light shine before people. Get out there and engage with people so that they can see the difference in you. Love people, even those who disagree with you politically. Now look, I'm not just making this stuff up. Jesus called 2 disciples to follow him who were very different on the political end of the spectrum, and it's impossible to make sense of how this worked from a human perspective. But he called Matthew, who was a tax collector, a guy that sided with Rome, and he also called Simon, a zealot, who was all about violently ending the lives of people like Matthew. And not only did they not kill each other, they actually came to love one another. How is the world supposed to see Christ in us? Jesus said, they will know that you are mine if you love one another. You know, as dark as the world is today, and it's dark, this is not something new. It was also pretty dark when the church first came into existence. Many Christians were being martyred during this time, including the apostles themselves. But what did the fledgling church do? Did they look at it and say, well, this isn't safe. We need to stop talking about the gospel. We need to stop engaging with our neighbors. Let's just keep to ourselves and do our own thing. No, they did the opposite, actually. They loved to the point that it didn't even make sense. There were 2 horrible plagues that swept through the Roman Empire, and millions of people died. In fact, it was so bad that Roman citizens were abandoning their own family members when they got sick. But what did the Christians do? Did they say, well, these are horrible people anyway. How many Christians have they martyred? Let's just stand back and let them get what they deserve. And again, the answer is no. It was actually the Christians who risked their own lives to love and care for the sick. In some cases, they contracted the plague and died themselves, but their response was so amazing that it was like light breaking through the darkness. Rome saw the response of these Christians, and they encountered Jesus in a real way. And the church grew explosively in those days, not because Christians were angered and outraged over the way the world was treating them, but because they loved like Jesus and lived like missionaries. So yeah, things are dark out there. I'm feeling that today. But my response, and the response that I will call other Christians to, is this: love like Jesus and live like missionaries. The world needs your light, but it will never see it if we retreat and hide. And yeah, it's not safe out there. Never has been. But Jesus has given us a mission, and we need to be about it, maybe now more than ever. I get it that it's scary, especially where our kids are concerned and as we think about what that looks like. I mean, are we really going to let them engage in honest conversations and let their light shine in a world that shot Charlie Kirk for just that? It definitely knocks you back a step, you know? But what if Jesus has something better than just keeping us safe? What if he wants to use our lives to change the lives of people around us? And what if our light shining in the darkness had the ability to impact the world and change the eternal destiny of people around us? That's what Jesus said would happen. And it's what actually did happen through the early church. So that's what I'm going to do today. And it's how I'm encouraging our church to respond also. Look, I'm sad today. Not going to lie. But I'm not going to let that sadness drive me to fear and anger. Instead, I'm holding on to Jesus, and I'm going to let it drive me to love and to be light into the darkness around me. How about you? Would you join me in praying for Charlie's family, for all the various devastation that's happening around the world right now? And not only praying for those things, but also would you join me in trying to be a voice into the world around us, trying to let our light shine in such a way that people will see Christ in us and glorify our Father in heaven? I believe that's the way. So thanks for listening today. I'm sorry that I haven't been on in quite a while, but this just felt like something that demanded a response. And so let's join our hearts together. Let's join our lives together. Let's live in such a way that it makes a difference and that the world would see Christ in us. Amen.